That was an amazing pass, Jackie Young. Running point to get Beckers off the ball, but Paige Beckers has been really quiet offensively.
When Caitlin Clark walked off the court that humid June evening after Chennedy Carter's brutal hip check sent her sprawling to the floor, the pain that traveled through her body was only a fraction of what she carried in her heart. It wasn't just a hard foul. It was a moment that would come to define not only her rookie season, but the kind of leader and woman she was becoming under the glare of a sport still learning how to make room for her brilliance. The same young athlete who had transformed women's college basketball into a national phenomenon now found herself in a very different kind of battle. One that had nothing to do with her three-point range or her vision as a playmaker, and everything to do with how she would respond when the game she loved was turned into a stage for hostility. The crowd at Gamebridge Fieldhouse had come expecting a showcase of skill and artistry, a clash between two teams rising in profile and confidence. Yet within seconds, all that expectation collapsed into shock. As Caitlin waited to receive an inbound pass, Chennedy Carter's deliberate movement toward her told a different story. One born not of competitive spirit, but of something darker. Resentment, perhaps even defiance toward the sudden force that was Caitlin Clark, the rookie whose stardom had become both inspiration and controversy across the league. The shove, sharp, intentional, unforgiving, sent Caitlin crashing to the ground. She rolled across the baseline, the echo of the impact silencing the entire arena. For a heartbeat, nobody breathed. Then came the chaos. Teammates rushing to her side, fans shouting, officials unsure of what they had just seen. But amidst the noise, Caitlin rose slowly, brushed the dust from her jersey, adjusted her ponytail, and uttered three words that would echo far beyond the hardwood. That's not basketball. Those words were not born of anger. They came from a place far deeper, from disappointment, from a bruised idealism that still believed in the sanctity of the game. She could have shouted, could have retaliated, could have demanded justice, and nobody would have blamed her. But what she did instead showed a maturity that transcended the moment. In her silence and in her restraint was a message about what it means to love the game even when it fails you. What few in that arena knew was that Caitlin's understanding of sportsmanship and grace under pressure had not emerged overnight. It was shaped years earlier, on the quiet hardwood of Dowling Catholic High School, under the guidance of Coach Christy Wallace. Coach Wallace had often reminded her players that how they behaved when treated unfairly revealed far more about their character than how they performed when winning. Caitlin had carried those words like scripture. How we treat our opponents when we're winning, and how we respond when we're being treated poorly, says everything about who we are. But the deeper layer of that composure came from another figure, one of the game's greats, who had once faced the same invisible trials. During Caitlin's sophomore year at Iowa, the legendary Sue Bird had come to Iowa City to speak to the team. It wasn't an ordinary visit. She had arrived quietly, staying long after practice ended, and found herself alone in the empty Carver Hawkeye arena with Caitlin, who lingered after everyone else had gone. Bird's voice had been calm, her words deliberate. "I want to tell you about something that happened to me early in my career," she said. "There were players who didn't think I belonged in the league. They weren't just physical, they were cruel. The fouls weren't about basketball anymore. They were about humiliation. They wanted to make me question myself." Caitlin had listened, rapt, her eyes wide with both disbelief and recognition. "What did you do?" she asked. Bird smiled faintly. "I decided I wouldn't let them drag me down to that level. Every dirty play would be answered with a clean one. Every insult would be met with respect. That's how you protect what you love, by refusing to let anyone corrupt it." Those words had taken root in Caitlin's heart, quiet and unseen, until that June night when they blossomed in the form of her calm defiance. What the public didn't know was that Sue Bird's visit hadn't been a coincidence. It had been arranged by Caitlin's mother and Nitzy Clark, a woman who had watched her daughters rise with both pride and worry, and understood how fame can turn purity into target practice, how a young woman who shines too brightly can awaken insecurities in those around her. She had seen the subtle hostility building long before the foul that sent Caitlin to the floor. The whispers about arrogance, the resentment over attention, the narrative spun by those uncomfortable with change. All of it had been there, simmering beneath the surface. And had reached out to Bird, hoping her daughter would find wisdom from someone who had endured the same silent battles. Bird's mentorship had been exactly what Caitlin needed. A reminder that greatness without grace is hollow, and that real strength often appears in moments of restraint rather than retaliation. So when Caitlin stood up that evening, looked the referee in the eye, and said those three simple words, it wasn't just a reaction, it was a culmination. It was the embodiment of years of guidance, pain, and perspective. That's not basketball, wasn't just about that one foul. It was about protecting the integrity of a sport she had given her life to. It was a declaration that she would not be broken, nor would she become what others wanted her to be. The clip went viral almost instantly, replayed across sports channels and social media, dissected by commentators, celebrated by fans, and dismissed by critics. Some saw weakness where others saw grace. But those who truly understood, coaches, players, mothers raising daughters in competitive spaces, recognized that it was one of the rarest and most powerful acts in sports. Compassion in the face of cruelty. In the days that followed, the narrative shifted. Journalists began revisiting the footage, analyzing not the foul itself, but the reaction that followed. Teammates spoke about how Caitlin's calm composure had steadied them. Even opposing players admitted privately that her poise had earned their respect. Off the court, messages poured in from young athletes, parents, and coaches who had seen in her something profoundly human. Not the fiery scorer or record-breaking phenom, but a young woman who understood that dignity is the quiet twin of courage. When asked later what she was thinking in that moment, Caitlin smiled faintly and said, "I just didn't want to see the game I love turn into something ugly." That was the essence of Caitlin Clark, a player who saw basketball not as a battlefield, but as a canvas for grace. Her response on that June night became a lesson in emotional intelligence, in how self-control is not weakness but strength refined through experience. The incident with Chennedy Carter faded in time, but the legacy of those three words endured, becoming part of her mythology. A reminder that true greatness isn't found only in records or trophies, but in the rare capacity to meet adversity with integrity. For Caitlin, basketball was never merely about winning. It was about elevating the spirit of the game itself, proving that even when the court became...
Russell, the trainer of the Wings. Inside, Ezra counted and a foul.
Can't sleep.
Suitor the rebound.
Not watching. Oh.
When Caitlin Clark hit the floor that June evening after Chennedy Carter's brutal hip check, the noise that followed was more than just the sound of a foul. It was the sound of a culture being confronted. The shove had been deliberate, the intent unmistakable, and yet Caitlin's reaction, calm, measured, and heartbreakingly dignified, cut through the noise with more power than any retaliatory gesture could have done. "That's not basketball," she said, and with those three quiet words, she drew an invisible line between competition and cruelty. It was not simply a critique of one play, but a declaration of values, an assertion that she would not let the game she loved be reduced to bitterness or spite. Beneath the simplicity of that statement lay years of understanding shaped by the lessons of race, privilege, and respect. Lessons her mother, and Nitzy Clark, knew her daughter would eventually need to face, and had long recognized that Caitlin's rise to stardom would expose her not only to immense admiration, but also to resentment, jealousy, and scrutiny rooted in issues much deeper than basketball. "I knew she was going to face things I couldn't prepare her for," and would later say, "I needed her to hear from someone who'd lived through it, someone who could teach her that responding with grace isn't weakness, it's strength." That someone had been Sue Bird. The former WNBA legend had sat with Caitlin years earlier and told her that real power comes not from retaliation, but from composure, from lifting the game higher when others try to drag it down. So when Chennedy Carter's hit came, Caitlin's response wasn't premeditated. It was instinctive, born from that framework of grace under pressure. The aftermath of the foul revealed how deeply that grace resonated. Within hours, the clip went viral, spreading across social media, sports networks, and news outlets. But unlike many moments that divide fans into hostile camps, this one seemed to bring people together. Viewers, players, and commentators alike recognized something pure in those words. A quiet stand for respect in a world that often rewards aggression. Even athletes who had been critical of Caitlin's media attention began to see her differently. They saw not just a rookie sensation, but a young woman carrying herself with integrity in a moment where the easy choice would have been to retaliate. Veteran WNBA players spoke publicly about her composure, noting that it reminded them of why they fell in love with the game in the first place. The power of her response extended beyond the court, reaching into homes and hearts across generations. 3 days later, a letter arrived at Caitlin's training facility, written in blue ink by a 12-year-old girl named Maya from Chicago. "Dear Caitlin," it began, "I saw what happened to you on TV. I saw how that player hurt you on purpose, and I saw how you didn't try to hurt her back. My coach says basketball is about respect, and you showed me what that looks like. Thank you for not letting her make you into something you're not." Caitlin read the letter in silence, tears welling in her eyes. In that moment, she understood that her restraint had accomplished something far greater than self-defense. It had become a living lesson in sportsmanship for a generation watching her every move. The incident sparked a broader conversation about the culture of women's basketball and the burdens that come with fame. There were debates about race, privilege, and representation, about who gets celebrated and who gets criticized for showing passion or assertiveness on the court. Caitlin, for her part, refused to engage in bitterness. In her post-game interview, her voice steady despite the swelling in her shoulder, she said, "Basketball is a physical game, and I understand that, but there's a difference between playing hard and playing with the intent to hurt someone. When we cross that line, we're not just hurting each other. We're hurting the sport and everyone who looks up to us." Those words rippled far beyond basketball, resonating with teachers, parents, and students who saw in her statement a universal truth, that dignity under pressure is the truest form of strength. Rather than allowing the controversy to define her, Caitlin transformed it into a campaign for positive change. Just weeks later, she announced the launch of That's Basketball, an initiative that celebrated acts of fairness, respect, and sportsmanship across women's sports. Through short films, social media highlights, and community partnerships, the campaign showcased stories of players helping opponents up after hard fouls, coaches defending rival teams from harsh criticism, and fans cheering for great plays regardless of uniform color. "I want people to remember that for every ugly moment, there are 1,000 beautiful ones," Caitlin explained. "For every player who crosses the line, there are countless others showing what real competition looks like." The response was overwhelming. Players from across the WNBA and NCAA began sharing their own experiences of sportsmanship, turning Caitlin's campaign into a grassroots movement of empathy and mutual respect. Coaches introduced That's Basketball workshops into